A number of people that have come along to the Sowy Stitch workshops have asked about free motion machine embroidery. And here's a little example, quite a simple one of what I'm talking about. Little cover, hot water bottle cover I'm working on at the moment, and you can see what I've done in this cotton fabric is I've done some very sort of gentle wavy stitching on the fabric throughout, just to add a little embellishment to the fabric. So what I'm going to do this afternoon is just to demonstrate to you how to do this simple sort of wavy stitch, actually called a vermicelli stitch, how you achieve that on your machine. And in fact the machine is the very first thing that you need to think about when you do free motion embroidery, and the very first thing is you need to think about your presser feet for your machine. And here's two presser feet. Either of these, I could use these for my machine. Quite often they're called darning feet. Mine are metal, but on quite a number of machines they're plastic, and you can see this one is a complete circle and this one a horseshoe shape. I could use either of these for free motion work. My preference is usually to use this one. I quite like having that open foot because I find when I'm stitching I can see a little bit more where I'm stitching. So that's my chosen foot, and I'm going to put that into the machine. Next thing to think about is something called the feed dog. And if you look at your needle plate, on all needle plates you'll have like some little tracks. And in fact, if you didn't know, these tracks, when you're doing straightforward stitching, are what actually move the fabric through the machine. But when you do free motion work, you want to disengage this feed dog, and on my machine and on most machines there's a button which you press to do that, and I've already done that. So that means that I can freely move my fabric around rather than the machine actually control the movement of the fabric. Okay, so onto the fabric next. I've just got a little sample fabric here, just a bit of cheap cotton fabric, and I'm going to do some free motion work on here. But it's quite a thin fabric, and one very important thing with materials and free motion work is you need to have a bit of thickness and stability to do it on. And what I've done on this piece of fabric is I've just lined it with a piece of felt to give me some stability. That could be some calico or some other cheap fabric, but it needs to be more than a very thin layer, otherwise the free motion work won't work. Okay, so off we go. Always have a little practice, even when you've done free motion work before, and you need a good sample to have a little practice to see how your threads and how your machine's going to work out. So I'll put the fabric into the machine. Okay, I know I've set my feed dog up, and I know I've got my presser foot in, so I'm just going to put the foot down. Right, next thing to just say to you is, in terms of the threads, when you are moving around the fabric, if you've got threads floating around, they can rather get in the way. So a little tip here, what I usually do with free motion work is I drop the needle into the machine and pull it back up, and you can just see here what I'm doing is I'm just pulling up the bobbin thread up to the top, and then what I'm going to do is just tuck that bobbin thread out of the way under that foot, and in a moment I'll snip those threads off so they don't get entangled when I'm machining. Okay, so ready to go. So needle down, usually start with a needle down. I hold the fabric with my hands, not tightly or not pressing hard, but just firmly. There are other ways of holding the fabric secure, but myself I tend to prefer my hands. And when you start off, the thing to remember is slow hands, fast foot. Okay, so I'm going to put my foot down, off I go. And you can see what I'm doing here is I'm moving the fabric quite slowly around. But you can probably hear that I'm machining quite hard with my foot, but the fabric movement is quite slow, and I'm making quite a small stitch, and I'm just drawing wavy lines with my needle and thread as I'm moving around. And when you first do this, you feel like the same when you first held a pencil. You'll never get used to it, but like all things, a little practice, and I'm just gently moving around, using my fingers, and I'll stop at that point. Okay, so I'll just release the fabric from the machine, just so that you can see what I've done. So here we go. Here's an example of, this is vermicelli stitch. There's lots of different types of stitches. This is quite a simple one. And I'll just show you the back here, because you can see quite clearly on the back where the stitch line is. You can see it's a very small stitch because I've stitched hard and slow movement with my hands. But there's a little example of free motion work, and a little starter for the 10 for those of you that perhaps with your machines at home would like to practice.